When we come back, we'll look at a movie that literally grossed pennies for every dollar it cost to make. It's called Howard the Duck, and it qualifies not just for this year, but as an all-time legendary bomb.
Are you ready for an incredible story? Wasted man! Wasted! Oh no!
Was a duck named Howard. Yes, Howard the Duck came from outer space on a laser beam and landed in our society with a cigar in his mouth and a scowl on his face. And before long, the studio chiefs in Hollywood were scowling too, because Howard laid a real big egg. The movie cost a reported more than $40 million to make, and it grossed just about $10,000 on the million. I don't know if you can work out that math, but it's not real good.
Hello, welcome back to the Flix Files. My name's Roger. It's deep dive time again. I'm going to pick out a movie and I'm going to kind of talk about my history with it and what parts of the movie I really like. And I thought, right, what movie should we do this week? And I was looking at my playlists, and I have a playlist called Guilty Pleasures. And basically I talk about a movie that I love, but most other people really, really hate. So I always think it's quite fun doing these films because I'm trying to win you over with what is usually considered a crap film. And I think the last one I did was Death Wish 3. And I really enjoyed making that video. And I thought, yeah, let's do another guilty pleasure. So you'll already know what movie this is if you've clicked on this. But I'm going to talk about Howard the Duck from 1986. And this is one that, if you forgive the pun, is sort of the bad egg of George Lucas's catalogue of films. And it's a real eye roller of a movie when you talk to people, because usually if you say you like Howard the Duck, they'll go, oh gosh, you're joking, you know. But I do like Howard the Duck. I'll be the first to say that obviously it is a flawed movie and there are things in it that are close to awful. But there's a lot in it that I do like, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. So I'm not going to do a full plot run through. I'll just quickly skirt through bits to get to the points that I want to talk about. But I saw this at the cinema at some point. It was released in '86, so I'm assuming it was released in the UK in '86, but I saw it at the cinema whenever that was during that year. And I went with one of my school friends. And I can remember us coming out of the cinema and walking down the steps to the pavement. And we were both going, that was great. And we really enjoyed it. And I think the reason for that was because of the last third part of this movie, which is one of the things I'll get to in a moment. And there are a couple of things I like about this film. One is the cast, Leah Thompson and Jeffrey Jones. Now, yes, I know Jeffrey Jones is kind of a blacklisted actor, but I try and look at movies through the lens of history, is the phrase that I use. So I look at them as I would have done the year it was released. And at the time, Jeffrey Jones was a very commercial and busy actor, and he was in a lot of movies. And he's really good in this, and I like his character in this, and his acting's quite funny. And Leah Thompson, the wonderful Leah Thompson, she became a big star the year previous to this because she played Marty McFly's mom in Back to the Future. And I understand that when she heard this movie was going to be made, she desperately wanted to be in it. And she talks about how she was keen to get the role of this character that's in a band called Cherry Bomb, which required her to sing and play the guitar. And she worked really hard to make sure that her singing ends up in the movie. She wasn't dubbed over or anything like that. And she sings a couple of songs in the movie, and they're very 80s songs. But she does it really, really well.
They call him Howard the Duck. No way to conceal it. Within a feather's touch, I love him apart.
But I love her in this film. She's gorgeous. And this film has a bit of a history with its development, because at the time it was about to be made, George Lucas was putting the finishing touches to his post-production facility, Skywalker Ranch. And I think I read that at the time he'd spent $50 million on making this facility. And he was hoping that Howard the Duck would be a hit because he was spending a lot of his Star Wars revenue making this facility. And when it bombed, when it was finally released and it just died a death at the cinema, in order to kind of make ends meet, he sold off the animation part of Lucasfilm to Steve Jobs, the Apple CEO at the time. And Steve Jobs turned that into Pixar Animation Studios. So it's quite interesting that the downfall of Howard the Duck led to the creation of Pixar in a strange way. So I guess every cloud has a bit of a silver lining, really. But this was directed by a chap called Willard Huyck. And Willard Huyck has worked with George Lucas previously because him and his wife, Gloria Katz, I believe, wrote the screenplay to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So George Lucas gave him the gig of directing Howard the Duck. And I believe they spent $2 million on creating the actual duck of Howard the Duck. And the plan was they were going to do it as animation and they were going to have the duck animated. So it would have been a sort of precursor to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But they had to hit a release deadline. And it was clear that if they did it as animation, they would never have made that release date. So they then went to using a child actor in a suit with an animatronic head. And the child actor apparently struggled with feeling enclosed in the suit and getting claustrophobia. So in the end, they settled for a small person that was an actor that filled the role of Howard the Duck. And it's okay. You can tell it's a small person dressed up as a duck with a false head on. But you quickly learn to accept it when you watch the movie for the first time. I did also read that it was going to be a hand puppet at one point. It was going to be like Yoda. So it would be somebody with the hand stuffed up into a false head. But there are many, many shots in this movie with Howard running and jumping off things and being very physical. So I don't really know how that would have worked as a puppet. It would probably have just made the movie even worse, to be honest. But the basic premise of Howard the Duck is it starts where he's on his own planet. And his world is kind of a parallel universe of Earth, except people are ducks. They're just walking, talking ducks. And there are a few little nods in the opening credits where he has a poster on his wall that's meant to be of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's obviously a duck that's dressed up as Indiana Jones. And it's quite cute. There's a few throwaway gags of that kind. But Howard gets pulled through a wormhole and he ends up on our Earth and he falls into an alleyway next to this nightclub. And it's at this nightclub that Leah Thompson is performing in her band. And as she comes out of the club, she gets accosted by two sort of thugs. And Howard the Duck springs to her rescue and scares them off. And it's interesting how Leah Thompson plays it because she's not overly shocked by the fact that suddenly there's this little talking, walking duck there that she can converse with. But she realizes that he's sort of homeless and he's out of his own time, completely alien to the planet, and he doesn't know what to do. So she agrees to take him in to her apartment and help him get back on his feet. And part of that is she has a friend played by the then very young Tim Robbins, who she believes is a scientist at the local laboratory. And when she goes to see him and she takes Howard with her, they discover that he's just like a lowly caretaker. So he's not really that helpful. And so Howard kind of resigns himself to the fact that he's going to be stuck on Earth. And he gets himself a little job working in kind of a seedy romance spa, should we say, and he's going around refreshing all the towels. And Tim Robbins brings along Jeffrey Jones. Now, Jeffrey Jones plays a character called Dr. Walter Jennings, and he explains to Howard that they were building this big machine called a laser spectrometer, I think it's called. They think that somehow pulled Howard off of his own planet down onto Earth. And Jeffrey Jones gets the idea that if they can reverse the process, then hopefully they can send him back to his home world. So they all think this is a great idea, and they all head down to the laboratory, but there's an accident with the spectrometer. And one of the baddies of the movie, which is a thing called the Dark Overlord of the Universe, apparently comes down and gets into the body of Jeffrey Jones's character. And it's at this point we get into kind of the last third of the movie, which is where it really kicks off.
I'm dead.
Yes, you are.
Which is the reason I really like this film. And I should say at this point that Industrial Light and Magic worked on this movie. No surprises there. We all know that George Lucas created Industrial Light and Magic when he made the first Star Wars. He got the team together. He built a visual effects team to work on his Star Wars movie, and then realized that he could make that a company that they could hire out to other films to make some revenue. And throughout the 80s and early 90s, Industrial Light and Magic were at the very top of visual effects studios. If you were watching a movie in the 80s and in the credits it said visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic, you'd get excited because you'd think, oh, fantastic, they always do really, really good work. So it's no surprise that with George Lucas being a producer of Howard the Duck, he got ILM involved, and they do some really, really great work in this. You've got to remember, this is pre-CGI. This is 1986. And I would put the effects on a par with kind of the original Ghostbusters. A lot of the lightning and plasma effects give off Ghostbusters proton pack vibes, should we say. So one of my first great scenes in this movie is where they head to a diner. So we have Dr. Walter Jennings, who at this point has been infested by this Dark Overlord, and it's slowly taking him over. So he's increasingly looking more ill, and his voice is starting to change. And Jeffrey Jones does this like evil voice where I can't do it. You've got to watch the movie to hear it, but he's got this horrible kind of croaky voice.
Just as you were brought down here accidentally. Tonight, the laser beam released me.
And he's slowly starting to develop these powers. And it all kicks off in this diner where some local truckers start to make fun of Howard the Duck. And Leah Thompson goes in to help him. And there's a scene where she shouts something like, "He's my boyfriend, leave him alone." And everybody just stops what they're doing and looks at her as if to go, oh God. And it's really funny.
He's my boyfriend!
That's disgusting.
Because there's a scene earlier in the movie where Leah Thompson jokingly seduces him with no obviously real intention of seducing him. She's just doing it for a laugh. But I think that was a scene that put a lot of people off when this was released at the cinema.
Fuck a duck.
And I can remember having this on video when I was a teenager, and the sequence where she's climbing onto the bed and getting ready for bed. And I think I rewound that scene quite a few times when I was a teenager because she just looks so gorgeous in it. But in the diner, they're beating up Howard. And it's at this point that Jeffrey Jones and the Dark Overlord, it completely kind of takes him over. So he's no longer Dr. Walter Jennings. And he just uses his powers to completely destroy this diner and just blasts everything with his hands. And he kidnaps Leah Thompson's character and drives her to the lab. And it's his intention to use the spectrometer to bring down another Dark Lord of the universe to infest her body, and then they can begin to sort of take over the world. So it falls on Howard and Tim Robbins to go and rescue her. And so we've had this terrific sequence in the diner, and then to get to the lab, Howard and Tim Robbins, they steal an ultralight, and they're flying this ultralight. So we get this little lovely chase sequence where they're being chased by the cops as they're flying this ultralight. And they really did fly this ultralight. I've seen the behind the scenes footage. And when you're watching the movie, it's clear that they really are doing it. They're not in front of any kind of blue screen, green screen.
Howard, pull up! Pull up!
Touchdown!
And it's very exciting. And how on earth they got them to do that and made it safe, I really don't know, but it's terrific footage. And they get to the lab, and it's there that they stand off against this Dark Overlord. And it's just this great kind of sequence of ILM at their very finest. Where Howard the Duck, he gets into this vehicle that has like this big laser in the back of it. And I think it's called something like a laser disintegrator or something like that. And he decides to fire it directly at the Dark Overlord. And Jeffrey Jones, by this point, his powers have really increased, and he's blasting his own energy back at it. And it's a scene that always makes me think of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, and the sequence at the end of that movie where Voldemort and Harry Potter are firing spells at one another, and they kind of smash in the middle. Whenever I watch that movie, I always think of Howard the Duck. But there's this huge explosion, and as the smoke settles, it's then we get to see the Dark Overlord in his true form.
Oh, good boy. Stay back. Stay back. Oh, boy. Oh.
Which is this wonderful creation by the brilliant animator Phil Tippett. Now, Phil Tippett, he was a stop motion animator at ILM, and he's famous for doing things like the Rancor monster in Return of the Jedi, and then he did the Tauntauns in The Empire Strikes Back, and things like that. And in Return of the Jedi, with the battle on Endor, there were scenes with the AT-STs, the two little two-legged mechanical walkers that the Empire used. And they were filmed using a technique called go motion, which was like a step up from stop motion. And it involved putting some motion blur into every frame. So it kind of got rid of some of that staccato effect that you get with stop motion and made it look a bit more fluid. And it worked really well. Well, they used that exact technique in Howard the Duck. Phil Tippett is animating it with go motion. And I can remember me and my school friend watching this and coming out of cinema going, that was bloody excellent, just that last third, because it just throws everything at you. And it's such a great sequence. And that is the reason that I like Howard the Duck. I like most of the actors in it, and just ILM's work in it as well. And there are things in this movie that aren't that great. Let's be honest, Howard himself is just a little person in a suit with an animatronic head stuck on him. But I really don't know how they could have done that any better given the time that this was made. Now, some may say maybe they shouldn't have done it at all. Maybe they should have just let it go as an idea. And there's tales that when this was previewed to the executives in the Universal Studios, when the film ended and the lights went up, some of the executives almost got into a fist fight because nobody wanted to admit that they green lighted this in the first place. So it was a dark moment for the filmmakers. But I kind of like it. That's why I wanted to do it as a guilty pleasure. And I owned it on VHS back in the day, but I never had it on DVD, and I never had it on Blu-ray. But at some point over the last few years, it got a 4K release. And when I heard of it and it had a 4K release, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that and put it in my library, because 80s movies are my biggest love. I think my most favourite decade of movies is the 1980s. And I have fond memories of seeing this as like a 16-year-old. So I had to pick it up. I had to get it and put it in my collection. And it is a really good 4K. It's got some nice extras on there. And for a movie of that era, it's the best pitch quality we're ever going to see this movie. So if you've seen Howard the Duck, I'd be intrigued to know what you think about it. Or if you haven't seen it, hopefully the bit that I've talked about and the few clips that I've shown you here might encourage you to give it a go, because if you can forgive its shortcomings, you might get some bit of fun out of this movie. And ultimately, that's what you want from watching a good film, isn't it? So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. I do videos every Tuesday and Friday. So Tuesdays tend to be just dipping into my collection and talking about random movie related things, and Fridays are usually videos like this, where I'll pick a particular movie and talk about it more in depth. So if you think you can get any value from that, then please consider subscribing. And I'll see you soon, guys. So thank you very much for watching and getting this far, and I'll see you soon. So bye for now.